traveling the world, getting paid really, really well. And but every time I went back at Kasi, my mom is from Diploof Extension, but she calls it Diploof Expensive, you know. So, but every time I was there, I was like, I'd hear kids going, "Oh, Vuyo, he's such a big, big dreamer." I was like, "Who's this Vuyo guy?" So I Googled to discover there was no Vuyo, totally a fictitious character dreamt up by this advertising agency in Cape Town, I think after smoking some green stuff, you know. So I quit my high-paying job. And I told my mom I was quitting, and she was like, "Oh, Mtanami, what about your medical aid and a pension?" She really doesn't sound like that. But the point is, a lot of people don't do epic stuff because of fear, and it's often it's not even your own fear. It's the people who love you's fear, right? And which was super interesting because I'm raised by a single mom. It was the same woman who always said to me, "Don't be an also-ran in life." If 5,000 people set out to run a marathon, 4,999 of them are there to serve to legitimize the winner. Go out, change the world, stand for something, be somebody, she used to tell me. And I remember thinking to myself, lay off me, woman, I'm only 3 years old. But I guess that was that sense of purpose that made me start Vuyos when everybody had exactly the same information, access to the same information, but did nothing about it. You know, I got asked when I opened restaurant, why did I do something about it? I started asking myself, Maravele, actually, why did I do something? And the only thing I can think of is that what my mom said to me, don't be an also-ran in life, right? So when we started the 4 Ways Farmers Market, my first executive decision, I remember it like it was last year. It was something I think I'd learned at Microsoft, was that always have your customer front and center, you know, and we put that grill, I'm sure you can see on the image, on that day at Macro when we rocked up. And my first executive decision was to remove the stand because I didn't want to cook and have my back to the customer. So I removed the stand and I put it on the table, only to realize the table was made out of wood, you know, and we're cooking with gas. So it's not rocket science. This is not going to work, right? But we found, you know, those concrete slab things that you put, that people walk on, you know, in the market. We put that between the grill and the table, and we started cooking, and we're pumping. This is week number 5. Peter, the guy in the previous picture, turns around to me, says, "Miles, we're on fire." I go, "I know, look at the crowd." He goes, No, we're on fire. It turns out he forgot to put the concrete slab between the grill and the table. Table caught a light. It was creating this massive flame. I look up, you know, there's plastic shade netting above us. It's melting. It's making this big hole, and the flames are bellowing. I look down on the floor, and the floor is made out of wood chips. It was lit, as the young people would say, right? An important lesson I learned there was that life is not linear. It doesn't always go according to plan. Subsequently studied as a chef. One of the things you get taught at culinary school is that if you want to make an omelet, you got to crack some eggs. The point is, if you want to make something worthwhile doing, you got to be comfortable that failure happens, that things don't always go according to plan, right? And yeah, and the most amazing thing about that is that you think people know that, but people are so fearful of making mistakes. And you know, did you know, actually, that when a child learns to walk, they fall on average 17 times an hour. But the child doesn't go, this walking thing maybe is not for me. You know, I've mastered crawling, it's more efficient. They keep getting up. And that's what it is. Entrepreneurship, brah, will show you flames. Pun intended. I just thought of that. That was super cool. Anyway, but it will, right? And failure is painful. It's like visceral. It's like someone is punching you in the stomach. But you just got to keep coming back and learning from that. So then the purpose of today's conversation is about branding. And I had the luxury of having a brand and then having to build a product to match the brand. Most people start with a product and they fall in love with the product and eventually build a brand. I had the luxury of doing it in reverse. It was super interesting because it taught me things I wouldn't have otherwise learned if I was doing from this way, right? I did it this way, that way, right? So those boerewors rolls you see there, the middle one had my mom's secret recipe, chakalaka. It was amazing. It tasted like awesome, even though it looks a bit dodgy, but I promise you it was amazing, right? And then what we did then, because I knew nothing about food at the time, other than I like eating it 3 times a day, and that I had the brand. Those are the 2 things. I trademarked the brand, and now I was building the product to match the brand. You with me so far, right? And I think this is what gives me an interesting insight on brand building, because I did it in reverse. So now I have this famous brand, but I have no product. How do I build a product to match the brand? So I didn't overthink it. I went to the 4 Ways Farmers Market and started selling the boerewors roll. So we started with the middle one. It kept on improving because turns out innovation is not an end state. You don't get one day and say, we are innovating today. Innovation is what you do, small little steps every day. So as you can see, the boerewors rolls are getting better and better. We started with 1, and then we added 2. We took the money from the top 2 selling from that day to improve the one that least sold. Are you with me so far? So take the money from the top 2, improve the one that didn't sell. But you do that every weekend, guess what happens? The rising tide lifts all boats. All of a sudden, all of them are starting to improve, right? And it's called, in fact, I learned that again at Microsoft. You know, at Microsoft, we'd release software, even if it was 75 or 80% right. You release it, and then you get your customers to buy it, and when they complain, you take the complaints and you call it software updates, you know? But they're improving. They're telling you what's wrong, and that's exactly what I was doing. And because I was looking at my customers every day, I could chirp them. I could see which one they were looking at or which one they weren't buying. But I was always getting the insights to therefore match the product to the brand, right? And because we're doing it consistently over time, by the time we got to this boerewors roll, we're winning awards. I was selling a 115 Rand boerewors roll. Yeah, go figure. Black dude selling 115 Rand boerewors roll. Okay, sure, with fries, but still, it's a 115 Rand product. But that's a premium product, right? And I learned the important lesson there that it is better to sell a product that is people's favorite than sell the best. A lot of mistakes people make is like, I want to be the best. Sometimes don't be the best, be people's favorite. The best restaurant you go to on your honeymoon, or you go to when it's an anniversary. You go there once in a blue moon. But your favorite one, you're going there regularly, right? So be people's favorite. And that's what we were learning over time. But the innovation parts were also the key. We started cutting our boerewors roll from top down as opposed to sideways. Because if you cut it sideways, it flops, falls apart. You can't put the stuff in. It doesn't look like a massive innovation, but to us, it was a game changer to cut it from the top because the base of the boerewors roll is stronger, so it can hold more stuff. But the game changer was we sprinkled some sesame seeds on the boerewors roll, right? And all the hipsters would come up to us, you know, guys with the shiny beards. They'd come up to us and we go, yo, dude, is it gluten-free? I'm like, yo, dude, for $115 is whatever you want it to be, right? And people would buy it. But we had the confidence to sell a 115 Rand boerewors roll because we've been building this thing over time, right? And then, obviously, I didn't want to end at the market. You know, like everybody, when you start a business, you want to stand like this and look at your bricks and mortar store and say, look, I made it, right? So I wanted to be like, have my own shop. And we found a site in Braamfontein. I remember when I saw my shop in Braamfontein, my soon-to-be shop in Braamfontein, I literally heard the angels, I was like, yo, we're going to print money here, right? I was like so chuffed and so excited. I called the landlord 4 times because I thought there's no way that site was available. But it turns out when it's your time, things sort of fall into place. Anyway, I got the site. We launched it on the 12th of the 12th of the 12th because I'm a system engineer and I'm a geek. So 121212, I thought it's a great binary omen. So we launched on the 12112. But we opened the doors on the 26th of December. But as a coder, when you write your first line of code, it must say hello world. So I wanted a hello world moment. I wanted the world to know we've arrived. Oh, Vuyo, the big dreamer is here. So I got 4 snow machines. We made it snow on that day, on the 26th, and it's day after Christmas. And the power kept on tripping, but I didn't care. And people were eating it was packed. It was so awesome, right? And then the next day, the 27th of December, not a single customer. Because it's Braamfontein, it's a student town. All the Zulus are back in KZN, the Xhosas and the Eastern Cape. There's no one. I'm sitting there. My tables are lily white like corporate South Africa. And I'm thinking, how did I get here, right? So turns out leadership is just about figuring things out, right? That's when you discover, like, your parents didn't know what they were doing. They were just figuring it out. And you only discover that when you become a parent. Those guys didn't know, right? So it's the same thing. Leadership, no one knows. Don't believe it, right? They're figuring it out as they're going along. So that's exactly what I was doing. I was like, okay, now my table's empty. My staff is looking at me like, okay, I don't know what to do. So I pick up the phone. I call the Sunday Times and I say, listen, would you be interested in hearing about how we made it snow in the middle of an African summer? And the journalist went, meh, and he hung up. But I still have nothing to do. So I decided to write the article about how we made it snow and how our restaurant is amazing, the food is good, and boetjies and all of this. I embellished, I used these big words, PDF, I used his byline, attached the images, and I emailed it to the journalist. He called me about 5-10 minutes later with a smirk in his voice. He asked me 1 or 2 questions. At this point, I'm thinking maybe we make it to page 189 on the Sunday Times, and it's a thin one in December. Guess what? I get woken up by Robbie Brosen on that Sunday, the founder of Nando's. We were on the front page of the Sunday Times 4 days after we opened our restaurant. Thank you. I'll take that. The important part there is that brands are important, but your story is more important. The problem is people don't know how to tell their stories. Telling your stories is what actually makes your brand. Otherwise, it's just the logo. Your story is the soul. I don't know how else, because people remember stories. They may not remember many things, but they'll remember the story. So by writing my story, I made the journalist's life easy, because often they have to write the negative stories, because in Kandla, you don't have to look for it, but your story is harder to find. So when I made it easy for him to find my story, guess what started happening? All the other journalists started picking up the story and writing it. And the only thing that the journalists actually honestly did do is that there's a bullet point there. I'm not sure if you can see it. That's the only thing he wrote. I wrote everything else. He only wrote that bullet point. And that turned out to be the most important investigative journalism ever, because he called SAB and he said, there's this guy called Miles who's taking up your brand, is opening restaurants. What do you guys think about it? And this was the first time I had found out what SAB thought about what I have done. And they had said, well, if he's got the kahunas to do it, good luck to him. I'm paraphrasing. But they basically said, And the important lesson I learned there was that in life, it is often better to ask for forgiveness than it is to ask for permission. Because had I asked them, what do you think they would have said? Now that I've done it, it was like water under the bridge kind of thing. And before I knew it, everyone was picking up my story. When I appropriated the SAB brand without compensation, they had spent 40 million rands on the brand. By the time I was finished doing all this free PR and marketing, and by the way, it cost me 0 cent. By the time I was finished, I had increased the brand equity to 100 million rands. I owned a brand that was worth 100 million rand, and I hadn't spent a single cent on advertising. I haven't even done social media. And the important thing, because there's a lot of like social media millennials here, the thing is, social media is cool, and I've seen it. I'm being converted. The thing about social media is you telling the world you are great. But when you write an article, or a journalist, a credible journalist on a national newspaper or radio station writes the article on your behalf, it gives it a different legitimacy. It's not you saying you are great. It's someone else saying you are great, right? And then, because I built the brand in reverse, I was always fearful that the product match up to the brand. So when you get invited to radio talk shows and the journalist goes, hey, let's open it up for callers. Callers, call in. Yo! Do you sweat buckets? Because I don't know what the caller is going to say. I make food, bruh. That means I make my product every day. It's not something that's fixed and I sell it multiple. We make it every day. So one day the chef can have a bad day, right? So there I am. Callers calling in, and this guy calls in, hey, yeah, Miles, I was there by your food truck. I couldn't decide which boerewors roll. You've got these 3. I liked all 3. They looked all great. I wanted this one, but I didn't want, and I couldn't decide. And your guy just cut them into thirds and made me one. I'd never taught any of my teams to do that, but they felt so empowered to be able to do that. And here I was now on national radio taking the credit like I knew what I was doing. And the point there is empower your teams. Let the people who are closest to the problem be the one with the most power. Because if they're escalating, all you're ever going to be is a chief escalation officer, the CEO. All you're doing is distilling people's problems. Because the people who should be fixing them, by the time it gets to you, so far from the problem, you don't feel the same as the guy who sees the problem. And by the time you do something about it, you've missed an opportunity. You with me? And also the upside, if someone does do it right, it turns around and look at here I was, someone speaking well about us, and I had nothing to do with it. And like I said, before you know it, everyone is picking the story, and it's being circulated everywhere. And I'm starting to meet really cool people. That's Sir Richard Branson to you, Rich to me, because that's how I roll. Others are knocking on my door. They want to take selfies. I'm like, chill, bruh. And then, as I wrap up, turned out Braamfontein was not the best place to put a restaurant because it closes for 4 months of the year. There's no one. And I priced my product for students, and it turns out students drink their money, they don't eat it. And my customers turned out to be lecturers. And again, brand must be congruent to your customer, your price must be congruent to your customer, and your story must be congruent to your customer. So, I didn't have this luxury of coming to a place like this. We're figuring it out as we're going along. So one of the things we did was when we were doing our stretch session, especially when things weren't going well, and that's the thing no one ever tells you. When things are going well, it's like someone is literally punching you in the stomach, right? And failure sucks. It just sucks. And especially as a black entrepreneur, half the time you're feeling like people are watching and like, yeah, kind of thing. And I don't know if it was me, but I just felt that all the time, right? Anyway, so it was like, oh, what do we do now? So we would just open my laptop and watch YouTube videos of which turns out South Africa has got a natural resource of young unemployed youth. So we thought, well, unemployed youth, cart, best solution. So we found these young unemployed youths and we gave them these amazing bright red polo t-shirts, great brand, not the Chinese stuff that you wash your car with, the ones that end up looking like this. We gave them the proper stuff I would wear. We removed polo and we put Vuyo, Vuyonaire actually. They started calling themselves Vuyonaire. And the coolest thing about that is that turns out if you treat people with dignity, they start treating themselves with dignity. They started standing up proud and strong. And they started selling our merch. They started telling everybody that Vuyo's rocks. And all of a sudden, people wanted the Vuyo caps. And we started selling more product on the merch because the brand to the retailer. And my guys are self-employed essentially, so they're making the 50, 60 grand is their money. And the bestest of part, we didn't pay for stock because we gave our recipe for the rolls and the boerewors because those retailers have a butcher and a bakery. So we'd give them the recipe, they would make it to us on consignment. In 2013, I ran an Uber-like business, asset-like. You're just making money, but there's no... And that's the holy grail, running a business where you can make money without having the hardcore expenditure that you are paying for all the time. If I leave you with anything, if you can do that for your business, where your brand is so strong that that's where you're playing, it's just making sure the brand is solid and then the ecosystem of your business is taken care of by someone else, that's the holy grail. That's actually where you want to be. So like I said, before we knew it, I had merch, I was writing a book. What do I know about writing a book? And there I was writing one. And but the caps, bruh, I can't tell you how awesome that product was as a business. So I wish you nothing but that. And then to close off, when those retailers started knowing how much we were making, they started kicking us out of the retail spots. But Azulu Makaplan, so I co-founded an association of food trucks called the Mother Truckers. And like, that's a million rand truck. Mine, old VW Combi, we paid 150K, we cut off the roof, and we started selling boerewors rolls there. And we use VW Combis because VW stands for Vuyo's Wors, obviously. Or Volkswagen is my personal favorite. And as you can see, we ran a queue longer than Capitec at month end because it turns out people are sheep. They stand in a line because they think the people in front of them must know why the people in front of them are standing there, right? And that's why it's called leadership, right? So what I would do is I would always make sure my queue was around 19, 20 people deep. So if it was below 19, I'd whistle to my team lead to slow down the cooking so that we'd get to 19. If it was above 19, I'd give him a different whistle and it would speed up. Our queue was always around 19 because energy begets energy. No one goes to an empty anything, right? So, you know what I'm talking about. There's people who just suck out energy, and there's people who infuse energy. I used to have this staff member in one of my restaurants. It's like, I was so scared of her because she just sucked out the energy. I would have to psych myself up before I go into my own restaurant. Or you'd have the guy who just drags their feet. I'm like, Joe, you got one job, to move your own body, right? If you can't do that, I can't help you, right? So energy begets energy. So when I launch more restaurants, I would get my cousins, aunts, and everybody, and I'll just keep them sitting there and give them the food, but they can't eat it until the real customers see. And they'll be like, oh, what done? And then I'll reheat it, and then that's the only time they can eat because there's no free lunch. And with that, I would like to say thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen. Whew. Yes. I'm not sure if we have the time for the questions. I think I sucked. Oh, we got two questions that we can take. Okay, yeah, it's just as I never rush so far. Okay, yeah. This is meant to be a master class, so not a sage on stage. It would be very pointless of me to leave here if I'm not answering at least two of your questions. The trick, though, is make sure there's a question, not a whole summation, just like straight to the question. Ne? Assemblief. Okay. Thank you.
But South Africans roll like that. First we make the comment and then we give you the
See,
question.
there we go, already.
Okay,
Already.
Okay, quick. You said about PR
Yes,
and
ma'am.
how, it's when somebody else writes your story or tells the story, even though you've written it and publishes it, it's much more credible. Absolutely agree. But journalists, sorry if there are any in the room, are getting less credible, though, in South Africa. The media is such a contested space right now. So how build your brand through PR? I'm a PR practitioner from way back. I believe that it is powerful. But how do you, in South Africa where the media is just this, it's...
Sure, I get you. So the answer to the question is actually, I think, relatively simple. Just tell a really good story, man. And a true story is just travel. There's nothing like it. Here I am standing on stage telling you about my story. I can't wait to be sitting where you're sitting and listening to your story. Because everybody wants to listen to a story. There's a second half of my talk that, unfortunately, because they gave me 20 minutes, I can't tell you. And it's better than the first part. Like it's 10x better than the first part, right? But because everybody loves this story, I'm forced to tell the story in order to tell you the second part. But all I want to do is tell you the second part, right? And I understand why. It's because great stories, that's why you can tell Intomi over and over and over. It's because just people pick up what they want to pick up. I used to lecture at Stellenbosch Business Schools, the strategy, and I was like frustrated because I'm lecturing business people and I can see the lights are on but there's no one home. And I told the dean of the business school, I was like, but I'd rather be with entrepreneurs. Why am I talking to these corporate types, And he said, Miles, when the student is ready, the teacher shall appear. So people will take whatever they want to take from the story, right? So just tell a good story and just be true to yourself. The rest is up to the osmosis. That's been my lived experience. Thank you. Well, listen, the markets are there. Yes, ma'am. You've heard of Twalisa?
Hi, Miles.
Hello.
Question. So your story began from the ad, Vuyo is a big dreamer.
Right.
And so your brand was created off of that.
Yeah.
So did you then have to buy the rights to that ad from the agency, or you are allowed, what was the process? You were allowed to just to run with it?
So I trademarked it because it turns out that Hansa, firstly, it's a minute-long advert, and they only speak about Hansa in the last 15 seconds. So 45 seconds is about this brand, Vuyo. I'm sitting there, I'm like, huh? How did this get approved? I mean, just logically, practically, right? But in fairness to them, they told such a great story about Vuyo that I got inspired. So they met they understood the assignment. They got the assignment right? But so for them, they were still advertising Hansa, their beer brand. So there was no need to trademark Vuyo because that wasn't their product. Their product was Hansa, right? So there was no need, And the truth is, how it works is that in brands, it's got first right use. Whoever uses the thing and everybody's seen it from that person, if you're the first one to use it, it's called first right use. Even if someone else trademarks it after the fact, you've got first right use rights. Does that make sense in English? So But a lot of people come to me and say, ooh, when should I trademark? Should I trademark my brand? I'm like, bruh, you only trademark your brand where you've got the money to defend your brand. Otherwise, it's bloody expensive exercise. So build it. And then they're loving it and it's worth, and there's copycats, it's now worth, and you've got the money to go take those copycats down. That's when. Because you can always use first right to prove that you've been doing it first before these other guys anyway. Yes, no, maybe? Like, those are just some pearls, right? And if anything from today, don't take notes. I see you've got notepads. No one ever reads those notepads. Like, put up your hand if you've ever gone back to look at a notepad. No one does. So convert the notes into bullet points and then take action, right? Make action points, not notes. No one reads it. Are they kicking me off stage, or do I have one more? Oh, yo, got Sam. Silent guy. I know when to leave the stage. Thank you very much, everybody.